I was going to call this debunking for idiots, but as a distinguishing feature of idiots in the paranormal field is that they don't debunk. That seems a bit pointless. Besides, I'm hoping none of my viewers are actually idiot level. Even I'm not, and I'm hardly a genius. But there are simple things that you need to understand, both about the paranormal world and the normal world, in order to investigate ghosts. And it's important to bear in mind that one of your first rules should always be, this is still the real world. Always remember that. Always keep it lodged in your mind. This is the world you live in. You haven't gone through a looking glass. You haven't entered a parallel universe. When you investigate ghosts, it is because you believe that the ghosts may be coming through into our reality, not that we've entered some kind of fairyland where everything is magical and different. If you're at home, unless you're in a very odd house, and you hear the doorbell ring, you assume that there is somebody at the door. You will work on that assumption, even going so far as to go and open the door. You don't assume that a small demon is impersonating the sound of your doorbell for its own purposes. And this is the kind of thinking we need to take with us on investigations. If you hear the creak of floorboards, ask yourself whether the house is cooling down or heating up. Ask yourself whether anybody has just trodden on those floorboards and they're springing back into place, or whether there might be something living in the house other than the humans. Death Watch Beagle can cause very unusual tapping sounds, but it's non-paranormal. If you see a flash of light, don't assume that it's paranormal. If you see it through a night vision camera, it almost certainly isn't. It's probably a dust orb or something going nuts around the place. I remember one investigation where we were in a house where virtually everything was a reflective surface, with the result that the lights we were flashing around in one room appeared on somebody else's camera as a brilliant flash of light in the room. But it was just the light bouncing off all the way. You should always remember how efficient light is at travelling. It's very good at bouncing off reflective surfaces, appearing in places where you'd never think it could reach. And unless you understand the qualities of light, you can't understand what something is when it comes. Now, I have seen lights I can't explain. I have not seen any lights that I believe are unexplainable. I just think I'm not clever enough. Maybe there was something paranormal going on at the time, but I certainly don't assume that. It may well have been a reflection from some other area. But always remember that the laws of physics still apply. All normal behaviour can still happen even in a haunted house. If you hear whispers, an awful lot of the time it's going to be two members of your team who know that you're recording and don't want to be picked up on it and mistaken for an EVP, with the result that they are almost always picked up on it and mistaken for an EVP. And one of the things you have to watch for is an EVP that sounds like a member of your team. And I have heard teams rationalise this by saying it's using our voices somehow, it's mimicking us. The most likely explanation is that you said something and forgot it. And I've seen this happen time and time again with EVPs. Something is said which is clearly a member of the team commenting on some aspect of the investigation, and everybody says, oh, it's a ghost, it's a ghost. And then of course you mishear whatever it comes up as because you're expecting it to be a ghost. EVPs are a minefield. They are also the best evidence we have. So we must persevere with them, but we must always remember that EVPs are so easily misheard. I used to know someone who was obsessed with the idea that evil spirits were everywhere. To him, a ghost was always going to be aggressive. And he got a kind of thrill from assuming that ghosts were threatening him personally. He was very much like that chap off Paranormal State, Ryan, is it? Who just has this complete persecution fantasy about demons. But he was interpreting every EVP in the light of the idea that it was a threat against him personally. So he heard strings of swear words, threat after threat. And when I listened, I heard noises like central heating, or a breeze, or one of the team whispering, and occasionally I heard what sounded like a genuine EVP, but they always sounded so much friendlier to me. And I had to explain to him several times that I thought that the swear words and things he was hearing were coming from his own head. It's always a good indication that you're making it up if what you hear sounds like something you would say. It's subconscious, but it happens. You'll be listening to an EVP and you'll suddenly hear what you would shout at someone if you were annoyed with them and wanted them out of your house. Which is why I never hear swear words, because I don't swear at people. So I don't get any of that. I also don't get weird messes of these and thous. A lot of people don't understand how these and thous work. So if someone says thou dove, you know that it's not something a real ghost would say if it was of the right era, because a ghost would know it's thou dost. It's quite simple, really. Thou dost speak to particles of dust, so thou art a dust whisperer. No, that throttle. But always be aware that if you're hearing something you're expecting to hear, it could well be that you've just invented it in your head. We're imaginative creatures. We're designed to imagine. Then there's the problem of cold spots. Now, I've never met a genuine, spontaneous cold spot. I have been in places where we managed to get a temperature to go down, and sometimes to the degree that we asked for. But I'm not convinced that's paranormal either. I think to some extent that's conditioned by what you feel of the breeze. Maybe subconsciously you're aware of how far it's going to drop if you stay in a certain position. Maybe even the thermometer is manipulated by the person holding it. Always remember, incidentally, that a little laser thermometer like this cannot tell you there's a cold spot. This measures surface temperature. The closer it is to the thing you're measuring, the better. But as you take it away from the thing you're measuring, after 10 centimeters away, the reading is effectively useless. There's just too much variation. I use it 2 centimeters away at most, because it's just not worth it, otherwise you don't get an accurate reading. It's not as accurate as I would like it to be anyway, but it works for surface temperatures, which gives you some idea of how hot or cold the room is and what the variation is in temperature during the night. If you want to measure a cold spot, you need a probe that actually goes into the cold spot. You get these little metal probe things attached to certain thermometers, which will go in and measure the air around it, which makes it possible to find a cold spot. And then what you do is you look for a reason for the cold spot. Now, I was once at a hotel that was supposed to have a lot of haunting activity. I was aware of none of it. Absolutely nothing happened on my investigation there, and on the other investigations nothing happened that I didn't feel I could explain. There were even things like an old stable block that smelled of straw. And when I went in, I didn't smell straw at all. I smelled a chemical smell. But I realised that to somebody not familiar with the smell of straw, it would smell that kind of way. So I went in and I investigated, and I found that they had quite a new wardrobe. And as you opened it, the smell of the treated wood was exactly the smell I had smelled coming in, that other people were smelling as either burning or straw. But it was completely normal. It was just the wardrobe. Then we have these cold spots in this hotel. They were quite pronounced. In one room, as you walked through, the corridor to it was icy cold, and then the room was cold. The corridor was much colder than the room, but still people saw the room as the haunted place. So I went to investigate it, and the first thing I noticed was that the wall was stone, which is not known for its warming qualities, and it was an outside wall. It was facing out onto an open street where the wind could howl quite dramatically. So the corridor was getting colder and colder through the night. It was closed at one end with a fire door, so when you opened or closed it you got quite a substantial draft coming through. And then the room itself had an inch gap under the door, and this was a direct line from along the corridor where draft swept. It was coming straight along, an icy cold draft straight into the room, which went past the foot of the bed where everybody experienced this incredible cold. So I had to say, I'm sorry, I don't think anything in this room is paranormal. There is cold, yes, but it's perfectly measurable. You can find out where it's coming from, and basically it's coming from the corridor. There was also, I believe, a vent in the corridor that was releasing cold air into the atmosphere. But the whole thing was perfectly natural. In another place there was tapping, and a colleague and I were together in this hotel room listening to what we thought was a very rhythmic, regular tapping for a ghost. It didn't change. It wasn't attempting to get anyone's attention by the look of it. And as we were sat there, we said, it sounds like pipes. Sounds like pipes heating up or cooling down. And my colleague, who has great qualities of observation, and indeed is part of WHIT with me now, because she's one of the few people that I can trust to really investigate thoroughly, she said, well, I thought when we came in I saw a radiator down that end. Now I hadn't spotted that, but she was right, it sounded exactly like a radiator heating up. So I went over to it, I touched it, it was warming, and I heard the tapping again, very close, and I could feel it vibrating. And we went downstairs to where the heating system pipes went, and we heard the same noise down there as the pipes went through the wall. Now the interesting thing is that on a subsequent visit to the same location, without my colleague, but with the group that we'd been with on that occasion, the leader of the group claimed that he had found a noise in that room that he could not explain or identify. So I said to him, well, what was the noise? And he said it was a rhythmic tapping. So I said to him, don't you remember we debunked that last time we were here? And he was quite resistant to it until another member of the team said, yes, actually, we did debunk it. And it was found to be the heating system. But he would have gladly presented that as paranormal. I'm afraid he has a reputation for it now, for making things like that up. But we need to keep our wits about us. We need to know what we're doing and what we're claiming. It's only if we rule out all the natural causes that we can start thinking of the supernatural ones. And if you find evidence of a ghost that can't be debunked, then it's important. But until you do, you need to have the mentality that it is a good thing to debunk. I always tell new investigators, learn to love the eureka moment when you figure out what something is that isn't paranormal, because there are a lot more of those than the moments when you think you've found a real ghost. We can do it, we can debunk perfectly. And it's better for us to do it than for someone else to come along afterwards and say, this is obviously just the wind.